Welcome back. So now that we've talked about the utility color classes, we can now move on to our first real component, which is the button. So there's a bit to buttons. There's many types of buttons that we can make, and they're really useful. They come up a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of uses for buttons on websites. So under documentation, under components, you'll find buttons listed alphabetically. And the first thing I'll show you, you can see the examples here. The same colors are coming up, those same contextual classes. So that's why I started out with them, not just to show you how to make blue text, but how to make a blue button, or more accurately, primary color button, whatever your primary is set to. Okay, so you can see that if I zoom in a little bit, to make one of these buttons, we have to apply a class called btn and also specify a color for that button. So if you just add btn primary, that's not going to do enough. That's going to change the background color and the text color, but it's not going to make something look like this with the rounded edges and the hover effect, and you'll see in just a moment. So I'm going to go back to my editor. I have a file buttons.html. It's empty. I'm going to make a button, and I'm going to give it a class of just .btn. And let's put something in here like click me and save. And I'm going to open this with live server. So here's our button. And without a color, it's not very exciting. I also zoomed in, so it's going to look a lot larger than it will for you. But that's our button. I can click it, and you can see that outline now. So it is rounded, but we don't have the color and all of that. So I'm going to now make this one btn-primary. So everything button starts with btn. Just keep that in mind. And there we go, I save, and it looks like this. And this is a good time for me to introduce one really quick thing. Notice that our buttons, our H1s, whatever we've been making are right up against the edge. What we can do is use an element called a container. So this will come up in the grid system. From now on, everything we do, I'm just gonna put inside of a container. So I'm gonna make a div with the class container, or if I'm using Emmet, I can just type .container, and the default is a div. And I'm going to put all of my code inside of here. And all that this does is give us some spacing. So if I save, you'll see that my content is now not up against the edge. And this container, if I make the page larger, it basically goes most of the way across the page. And it prevents our elements from running up all the way on the left or all the way on the right. So let's make a couple more buttons. So I'm going to just duplicate this. I'm doing that, by the way, by typing Shift, Option, and down arrow in VS Code. So we'll do button primary, button secondary. Let's do success. I won't do all of them. Info. Okay, so we're getting some of them here. And let's do danger, and then warning. And you can see the effect that our container is having. Our elements are, well, you can see here inside this container, they're not just running up against the edge. This container is changing size as we change the size of the window. That's all I'll say about a container for now. If you do want to read about it, you can go to layout, and then on the overview page, it says containers are the most basic layout element in Bootstrap. So all of our content traditionally is going to go inside of a container. And once we talk about the grid system, we'll always use containers. But for now, I'm just using it to neaten things up a little bit, although this is obviously a very ugly web page still. So there's also light and dark and something called the link, which just styles it as a link, takes a button and makes it look like it's not a button. You can do the opposite as well. So you can take a link and make it look like a button by giving it the same exact classes, btn and btn primary, or whatever color you want. So what they're showing here is that technically, the classes were designed to work with button tags, which is what I'm doing here, but you can also use a link. So I'll quickly do that. Let's do an anchor tag with btn, and let's also do the class btn dash, let's do success. And I'll leave href blank, and I'll just say this is a link. And if I save, it looks like it's a button, but it's still an a tag. These are actual button elements. And you can do the same thing here with an input. So a type equals to button, type equals submit, type equal reset. These are all inputs, and they're all going to look identical, as you can see here. Next up, if we keep scrolling down, we have outline buttons. So instead of doing btn-primary, we can change it to be btn-outline-primary. And that gives us the same color, whatever our primary color is, except it inverts things so that the inside of the button is white and it's just the outline that becomes a primary color, as well as the text. And we get this hover effect. So I duplicated the buttons, and I'm going to change things to be btn-outline-primary. And there you go. This is quite the collection of buttons, as you can see. It's not particularly attractive. Maybe I'll pretty it up right at the end. And we can do the same thing with all of them. I'm just going to fast forward just to show you the end result. Here's secondary. Okay, here we go. These are the different outline buttons. I'm not including dark and light, as you can see. So there is a light and a dark. They all work exactly the same. I just don't want to waste your time. Next, we have different sizes for buttons. So I'll go ahead and add a little divider between our sections. Okay, so I just added some H1s in here so that we can see my different sections. And I'm going to talk about button sizes. So alongside color and outline versus solid buttons, we can also specify sizes. So you could customize the size with your own CSS if you have an exact pixel width. But if we just take one of these buttons, and I don't like the primary blue, honestly. Let's focus on info. I really like that info color. So this is sort of the medium size by default. BTN info gives us a info colored, plain old medium sized button. So if I want a smaller one, I'll duplicate this, and I need to do btn-small. If you look at the docs here, we have to say btn, and then btn-primary for the color, and btn-small. So our classes, we can have multiple, and it can get a bit long depending on what you're doing. You do have to be very explicit. So you can't just say btn small and leave off btn. And if you see, here's our smaller button. So let's do small button. I'll do regular button, and then I'll duplicate this one more time and do large. And as you probably already saw, it's just btn-lg. Okay, so those are different button sizes. There's actually two last things. First is that we can make a block level button. So in our case, it's not going to be very exciting. If I just copy this here, let's do the secondary one and just paste it in here. You'll see that we end up with a button that goes all the way across the width of our container. So as I make the container larger, this button grows, but that's pretty much it. You'll see that the other buttons aren't changing size. They have a fixed width. This block level button will grow. Now, usually you don't want a button that long, but you might have a login form in the middle of your page. That's like a pop-up, and you might want the button to go all the way across the form. So I'll leave that. And then the last thing here, disabled and active states. So you can add the class active to make your button look active. So let me just show you. If I duplicate, let's do warning, and do a couple of those in a row. So 2 warning buttons, and one of them I will give the class active in addition. You'll see here, oh, I see, I'm doing outline. Let's not do outline. Let's do just regular warning. Solid color. Okay, so this is the non-active version. This is the active version. So it sort of looks clicked. As you can see, when I hover, it's the same color now. That's all that there is. You can also make a button look disabled by adding disabled as an attribute, not as a class. So that's a bit confusing. So I'll do one more. If I duplicate, oops, I did it twice. If I add disabled here, we get this lighter version. So these are 3 different versions of the same warning button. All right, so to wrap things up, I went back and just edited things a little bit, added in H1s down here, added in a second block level button. This one is the large block level. This is just the standard size. I could also do a small one if I wanted to. Feel free to take a look at any of this. Let's make this one a danger button that is btn-small. And you can see we get a block level button, goes across the entire container, but it is smaller, but it's also red. Anyway, there's a lot to buttons, but once you master those colors, really all you have to do is remember the sizes, remember the colors like we talked about, and remember outline versus just standard. So BTN dash a color, and those are the standard buttons. Anyway, these will come up more in the course. You'll get more comfortable with them as we go.